Hello and welcome to the Music GCSE YouTube channel. This video is part of a series on the Concerto Through Time, and in this video we're going to take a look at the Baroque period. So, what will you learn from this video? We're going to take a look at the dates of the Baroque period, the typical musical features of this period of composition, the instruments used, the different types of the Baroque concerto, and suitable composers. So let's start by taking a look at the dates for the Baroque period. The Baroque period was circa 1600 to 1750. However, if you are asked to identify the period of composition within your exam, do not put dates. It's important for you to know them, but the answer that you're looking for in your exam is the period of composition. So name it by name, so either the Baroque period, the Classical period, or the Romantic period. Now let's take a look at the typical musical features of the Baroque period. If in your exam they ask you to identify the period of composition and you've identified it as Baroque, what usually follows is a question such as give 3 or 4 reasons for your answer. These typical musical features are an ideal answer for that type of question. So, the typical musical features of the Baroque period is that it uses a small orchestra. The Baroque period will use a harpsichord, we'll talk about that in just a moment. The Baroque period will use terraced dynamics, that's where there are sudden changes from either loud to quiet or quiet to loud. The Baroque orchestra is mainly string based. It will use diatonic harmony, again we'll speak about what that means in just a moment. The Baroque period will use balanced phrases. A phrase is like a musical sentence. You might get a 4-bar phrase or an 8-bar phrase, and what balanced phrases means is the phrases throughout a piece of music will all be the same length. And the Baroque period will use a continuo section, which again we'll speak about a little bit later in this video. The Baroque orchestra will also make good use of ornamentation. Ornamentation are things like trills, medents, acciacchatoras and turns. Now we're not going to speak about those in this video, we will feature them in a future video as part of this video series on the concerto. So let's take a look at the harpsichord and what it sounds like. So the harpsichord is an early version of the piano. It has a distinct sound, so harpsichord will pluck the strings inside it rather than strike them like inside a piano. You can only play 2 volumes on a harpsichord. You can either play loud or quiet. If you look at the picture of the harpsichord on the screen now, you'll see it's got 2 sets of keys. One set of keys will produce a quiet sound, the other set of keys will produce a loud sound. That means you cannot gradually change the volume, so you can't do things like crescendos, which is gradually getting louder, or diminuendos, which means gradually getting quieter, when playing the harpsichord. That's why the Baroque orchestra uses terraced dynamics, where the whole orchestra will go from playing quiet to loud suddenly. That's because of the limitations of the harpsichord. And here's a tip for you. If you hear a harpsichord in an extract of music and you're being asked to identify the period of composition, it must come from the Baroque period. The harpsichord is unique to the Baroque period of composition. Let's have a listen to what the harpsichord sounds like. So when we listed the musical features of the Baroque period a few moments ago, we said that the Baroque period uses diatonic harmony. But what does that mean? Well, if a piece of music is written using diatonic harmony, that means all the notes and chords belong to the same key. So for example, if the music is written in C major, there'll be no sharps or flats within the music. That's because the key of C major has no sharps or flats. So it means the melody will only use the notes C, D, E, F, G, A and B. And it means the harmony, the chords, will only use the chords C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor and B diminished. If the music was to use any other notes or chords, for instance if the music had a D sharp in it, we have then used notes which are not natural to the key. That means the music is no longer diatonic. Now the Baroque period and music written in a diatonic harmony can still modulate, that means to change key, to other keys, but the music will then be diatonic within the new key. So for instance, if a Baroque concerto was written in C major, it could modulate and change to A minor, but once it's modulated and changed key, it means that all the notes and chords will then be diatonic to that new key, in my example, A minor. Another thing we mentioned when we were listing the typical musical features of the Baroque period is the fact that it uses a continuo section. The continuo section is a part of the Baroque orchestra. It is made up of bass and harmony instruments. So the typical instruments that would be involved within the continuo section could be a double bass, a cello, a harpsichord, or a lute. Now, a continuo section might not use all of these instruments. It could just use two of them. It could just use the harpsichord and a cello, or the harpsichord and a double bass. It is the continuo section of the orchestra that is responsible for keeping the bass and the harmony going throughout the piece. The continuo section is another unique feature of the Baroque period. The continuo section did not feature in any other period of composition. Now let's look at some of the common instruments which will most likely feature in a Baroque orchestra. As we've already said, the Baroque orchestra will use a harpsichord. The Baroque orchestra is heavily string based and will use string instruments such as a violin, a viola, cello and double bass. A Baroque orchestra may also use some simple woodwind instruments such as the flute and oboe. And the Baroque orchestra can also use some brass instruments such as horns. Now, if it does feature brass instruments, these will be basic brass instruments which don't have valves like a modern day trumpet and other brass instruments. And if a Baroque orchestra does use brass, it will most likely also have some percussion instruments as well, such as the timpani drums. Another unique feature of the Baroque period is the fact that there is more than one type of Baroque concerto. There is the standard Baroque concerto, which is written for one soloist and an orchestra. There is also the Baroque concerto grosso, which is written for more than one soloist and an orchestra. If you get a question like this appear, which featured in the 2021 listening exam, it asks what type of concerto this is. Notice it doesn't say which period of composition, it asks what type of concerto. This is a dead giveaway that it's Baroque, because Baroque is the only period of composition that has more than one type of concerto. So the correct answer would either be a Baroque concerto or a Baroque concerto grosso, depending on what you hear in the extract. And let's just quickly remind ourselves of the different sections of the concerto. In a Baroque concerto, we would expect to hear the tutti section. A tutti section is where everybody in the orchestra all performs at the same time. We would also expect to hear a solo section, and this is where the soloist or soloists take the spotlight and take the main part and the lead within the piece. The orchestra will still play, but only to provide the accompaniment. There is no cadenza section within the Baroque concerto. And the last thing we're going to learn about in this video is a suitable composer for the Baroque period. You will never be asked to identify the actual composer that has been chosen for the extract in the exam, but you may be asked to identify a suitable composer. So you need to remember at least one of these. So suitable composers for the Baroque period would be Vivaldi or Bach. So just remember one of those for the Baroque period. Now that we've learnt about the Baroque period of composition, why don't you pause the video here and test yourself. Can you answer the questions on the screen? If you've liked this video and found it useful, don't forget to click the thumbs up to give the video a like. If you haven't already done so, you can click the logo to subscribe, or click over here to have a look at one of our other videos. You can also use the music revision resources at www.musicgcse.co.uk.